appreciate you all coming out today, especially since we had no idea what the weather was going to do. My name's Jerry Ford, and I am the director of the Minnesota Premium Garlic Project, which has been going on for 4 years now, funded by the Department of Agriculture through the Sustainable Farming Association. And it has been just the most fun. They actually pay me to do this stuff. It's just the most fun. And we'll be ending that project in September. We will, of course, carry on with garlic work through the Garlic Growers Group with SFA, and of course, with the Minnesota Garlic Festival. Anyway. All right, so Chris Kudrina, my good friend of many, many years, to take over from here.
Thank you. But I'm going to start on how and why we did this. Talk a little bit about garlic varieties, soil preparation and planting, growing and harvesting, disease, my pet peeve, curing and storage, and then selling and marketing is what we're going to go through today. How many of you are currently growing garlic? So most of you are. Okay, so some of you. And how many of you want to grow garlic? How many of you are in the wrong place and think this is... All right, so we've been in central, our home is actually in South St. Cloud. We don't live here. About 15 minutes north of here, about 8 miles. And we were looking for property for a long time. We found this piece of property in 2004, 35 acres, the 2 tree lines here, the road there, and then the road on that side. If I knew then what I know now, I don't know what I would have bought this place. This is glacial till, glacial moraine country, all these ridges. If you'd come out a month ago, we burned the prairie this spring. If you'd come out a month ago, you'd go, how the heck does anything grow out here? Because it's just a sea of rock. Area here, and there's a couple of other areas like this, has 12 to 24 inches of rocky sand. And then unfortunately, and I didn't know this at the time either, there's a clay line, a really nice solid clay line underneath that. So it's either kind of too dry or too wet. There's very rarely the right amount of moisture, because if we get a heavy rain like we have in the spring, it tends to sit on that clay and saturate the soil, which isn't good for the garlic. So we did 8 years ago, 7 years ago, we'd had 23 inches in May and June. It's a lot of rain for 8 weeks, almost 3 inches a week. And I was running ag pumps. The garlic happened to be in the field that it's in now, and we were running these 12-volt ag pumps and with long hoses. There was standing water everywhere in here, believe it or not. So I drain tiled. You can't see real well, but there's kind of a stake right at the edge of the prairie there. And I ran a 600-foot line down to where those dead willows are, and then a couple of lateral lines. And that's taken care of when we have too much. When garlic gets wet, the viruses really start to take over, and they get yellow and they don't like it. So this, combined with our mission, we wanted to build community as we grow great garlic using sustainable means. We're doing this not as it's a business, but we're really doing it as we start to age out. I'm 68, Joanne's a little bit younger. We're doing this because it's one of the ways we can stay connected to the community. There's a couple people here today that we know that we wouldn't know if we hadn't been doing garlic, and it's wonderful to know them. We get to hang out with teenagers in August to help us with the cleaning and help us with the packaging. We wouldn't be able to do that. So this building community is first in our mission as we grow great garlic. We did our first crop in fall of 2008. We've tried different locations. We settled on this spot. I built this shed and the well, which is way out by the road, in 2009. That's another story when you have your well guys and they start wandering around with a coat hanger trying to figure out where to do it, and you wonder who's paying for it. We have 4 beds, as you can see. 1, 2, 3, 4. This one's number 1. And we do a pinwheel, a clockwise pinwheel. So the garlic is in a 4-year rotation. I cheat a little bit because we do grow some onions in our kitchen garden, and so there's a little bit of an allium overlap, but it's never been a real issue, especially with the sandy soils. It's the fusarium in the soil that you don't want to build up, and the fusarium doesn't like the sandy soils as much as Jerry's heavier soils. So one of the advantages of sandy soil is you don't have as much fusarium issues. So that's a high level Sun's coming out and getting even hotter. So that's a high level on why we're here, how long we've been doing this. Anything I missed, Joanne or Jerry, at a high level? Otherwise, I'll go into some garlic varieties. Everybody know there's hardneck garlic and softneck garlic. Farther north you grow, easier it is to grow hardnecks. I used to have a customer for many years from North Pole, Alaska, which is a suburb of Anchorage. People grow garlic in Alaska, believe it or not. I finally asked her how she did it, and that's an interesting story, but they do. Further south you live, the easier it is to grow the softneck garlics. There are growers in Minnesota that successfully grow softnecks. We just have not been able to do it successfully. I've bought from Klingelholtz, who grow beautiful, giant softneck garlics. I buy his garlic, I plant it here, and it doesn't do squat. Can't explain it. So we only grow hardnecks. Over 10, 12 years. We've gone through 40 or 50 varieties. We've settled on 5 or 6 that do well for us. I think garlic, more than almost any other plant I know, is very susceptible to microclimates, to the soil, the particular location. If you're relatively new to garlic, I encourage you to try a lot of different varieties, disease-free of course, and just stick with the ones that work. And we've got mostly porcelains in here, Armenian, Music, Georgian Crystal, what am I forgetting? German Extra Hardy, otherwise German Porcelain. It's got lots of names. And Georgian Crystal, I already said. So those are the hardnecks that we, porcelains that we grow. We have just 100 or so Chestnut Red, and then we have a pretty big supply of Deerfield Purple. I'm hoping that it's visually obvious to you guys how different that Deerfield Purple is from the porcelains. And the Deerfield Purple is in the purple stripe family. The porcelains are called porcelain because they tend to have white wrappers, look very white. They have 4 to 6 cloves per head. The Deerfield Purples tend to have purple stripes because they're in the purple stripe family, and they tend to have twice as many cloves per head. In the spring, these guys always look like they're not going to grow. They look really sickly. I always say to Joanne, why are they growing these? But by now they're starting to look pretty good, and by harvest time they're going to be a nice crop. A third of this garlic in here is Music. It's not my favorite garlic for a lot of reasons, but it's very popular. It's named after Al Music, fellow from Serbian area. He was the founder of the Ontario Garlic Growers Association. He had a friend of his send him a bunch of different kinds of garlic from Southern Europe. Garlic that grew the best he named after himself, and it's become, I would say, the most popular hardneck garlic in North America. So there's another garlic in Europe that has a different name that's the same garlic. Deerfield Purple has an interesting story also. It comes from Vietnam, and nobody knows if it came into Vietnam because the French brought it in, or if it just went overland because garlic's native to the Caucasus, Central Asia. So they don't know how that garlic got to Vietnam. But then it was in a seed bank in East Germany when the Soviet Union still existed. And when the Soviet Union was collapsing and the wall came down, a bunch of scientists from Pullman, from Washington State University, went over there and grabbed a lot of the seed from that seed bank and more or less legally brought it back into the United States and numbered it all. And then a guy that I know pretty well had a buddy who had a friend, Deerfield Farm in Oregon, and this buddy, who was an entomologist at Oregon State, got his buddies at Washington State to give him a bunch of these seed samples. One garlic grew really well on the farm, and so the guy on the farm named it Deerfield Purple. So there is a Vietnamese garlic that has a different name. I'm sure it's in other parts of Europe too. But I picked it up from my friend. We were the first ones to grow it in Minnesota. It's become more popular. We think it's a very tasty garlic. But so the garlic, there's 350, 400 named varieties of garlic in the world. But as you do DNA testing, you will find that maybe there aren't as many as you think. But because garlic's sensitive to microclimate, Jerry's Armenian doesn't necessarily look like my Armenian, even though we're only 30 miles apart. The Garlic Seed Foundation guys, 20 years ago, took a few varieties of garlic, planted them out in 3 different states, and then after a few years brought them back together, and you'd swear they weren't the same garlic. So very sensitive to microclimate, which is why I'll say again, if you're getting going, don't be afraid to experiment. And you can't always guarantee that an Armenian grown out in Washington State is going to grow like Jerry's Armenian from Minnesota. So it's complicated. At the garlic festival, these people probably 100 times a festival, well, which is the best garlic? And I say, well, which is your favorite kid? And I'll tell you which is the best garlic. It's always, and I'm semi-serious, because if you go to my website, we did a lot of garlic taste tests when we were going through all these varieties. And I could take any 5 or 10 of you, and I could have the raw garlic, I could have it sauteed, I could have it roasted in an oven. And none of you will describe it in the same way. And what I can say generally, and Joanne, you correct me, or Jerry if you don't agree, the porcelain varieties, the ones that are taller, tend to get very, very mild when they're cooked. Kind of like how an onion when it's cooked a lot. There's just not a lot of flavor left. The flavor's gone into whatever you've put it in. The purple stripes, we find, tend to hold that flavor a little better. It also changes from year to year depending on the climate this particular year. But go to those taste tests and we'll have somebody take a taste of an Armenian and my daughter will say it's bitter and it isn't good, and somebody else will say sweet and smooth, and they're eating the same thing at the same time, cooked in the same way. So I do say to people, it is like wine, it is like beer. It depends on your taste buds. And if you are new to garlic, at the festival, I always say, buy a little bit of all of what we sell and decide for yourselves. But that's how we do it. This split into families and varieties was largely done by a guy out of Washington named Ron Engeland from Fillory Farms. And he's the one who kind of categorized them based largely on appearance. He did talk about taste differences, but he focused on appearances primarily. And you can see visually how different a purple stripe is from a porcelain, and then when you harvest them and look at the bulbs, they're quite different also. From a cooking point of view, we do advise customers. We've got an elderly gentleman who buys our garlic. He's chair of the Bronx Garden Club, believe it or not, in New York. And he said, I'm off salt, can you send me any more garlic? And I said, just put it in literally 30 seconds to a minute before the end, like in a stir fry or a soup, and you'll get a good kick from that then. If you don't want a lot of kick, put it in early. And what Joanne's explaining is some cooks, if you're peeling dozens or hundreds of garlic for pickles or whatever, go with the bigger porcelains in the big cloves so you don't have to peel as much. And the other nice thing about the porcelains is they do have easy wrappers to take off. The purple stripes tend to also. There are varieties like the rocambole family where I actually like the taste quite a bit. If you can sit there for 10 minutes and try and peel a rocambole garlic, the cloves glue themselves to the wrappers. So part of this selection is not only how well they grow, but how easy are they to clean. Soil preparation and planting. This had been conventionally farmed for a lot of years, 60, 70, 80 years, maybe even longer. The aerials from the University of Minnesota go back to the 20s, so I can see what has been happening in this geography. If you don't know about those aerials, just go to University of Minnesota aerials, and it's all by area, township, and you can find really cool stuff about your land. It's going to go back, in some cases, all the way to the 20s. Not everywhere in Minnesota, but certainly by the 30s, the whole state was getting covered every 5 to 10 years. And now they're doing it every year or two. So it's really interesting stuff. So this was conventionally farmed. Organic, percentage of organic matter is a big deal for anything you want to grow. When I first started here, we were at 0.5% or less, which is pretty bad. We put 40 to 60 bales of straw on each of these beds on a rotating basis when we do the garlic. We're pretty careful with the kind of amendments we use. And we're up to, depending on the bed here, 6 to 7, even 8% organic matter, which has really helped us with these sandy soils holding water and getting good growth. You can see I have a cover crop. SFA has a lot of really good people on cover crops. As Jerry knows, because we're planting in the fall, we're kind of counterintuitive from everybody else as to what we need from a cover crop, because most people are taking off, whether they're vegetable growers or row crop growers or whatever, they've got soil that's open in the fall and they want to put a cover crop in, and then the spring they want to start again. Well, we want to have a cover crop over the summer. We want it bare in early October so we can plant. So we're kind of counterintuitive. And there tends to be cool season and warm season cover crops. What I have in bed 1 and bed 3 is annual ryegrass, which I really like. It's a cool season. I like the annual ryegrass because it's annual. It dies over the winter. So if I till that bed up and some of the grass survives, it's not going to be there in the spring, because your cover crop can become a weed. You can hear horror stories about cover crops that get out of control. And then berseem clover. I used to use white Dutch, but that winters over very nicely. The berseem is a very tender annual also, and it dies. But I've used other stuff, and if we have a really hot, dry summer again, this will start to die back because it is a cool season annual. I might till it in. I might put in buckwheat, which is here on a typical summer, 30 to 35 days from planting. It's flowering, so I have to till it in or mow it because it's going to be going to seed within a week after that. And then your buckwheat is a big weed if you're not careful, although there's worse weeds. So I'll do a buckwheat. And my goal here is that by end of September, I will have tilled this in and the bed will be close to ready. And then I'll do a final, because this will be the next year. So then by the first week in October, I'll do a final till and I'll do all my markings and lay everything out. What else do I want to say about soil prep? I tend to use, there's two kinds of byproduct from your turkeys and your chicken. One is the poop byproduct, which tends to be like a 12-4-10. It's going to have all three of your primary NPK ingredients. I have plenty of P and K in this soil, believe it or not. It's nitrogen that tends to be short. And the turkey feathers tend to run 10 to 12%, 12-0-0 or 10-0-0. And so I will put on the turkey feathers in the fall pretty heavily, a couple of bags, 50-pound bags of that stuff. And they don't provide nitrogen right away, which for a garden or something is usually not a good idea because you want your nitrogen to be there for your tomatoes or whatever right away. But for the garlic, it's kind of nice to put that turkey feather fertilizer on in the fall, and then as the soil warms up and the bacteria start to decompose that turkey feather, you get that nitrogen, in theory at least, at the right times. I'll do a soil test on this bed and that bed, the two cover crop beds, so I know what the garden's going into, and I will adjust based on what the soil test tells me. So it's custom every time. The thing, it's really hard to get a good test, as some of you may know, on nitrogen, because nitrogen is so much a function of weather and how wet, and it does leach and stuff. So I've just developed a habit. Carl Rosen, who I think I mentioned a couple of you already, who's retiring as chair of the soil department and grows a lot of garlic, is kind of the go-to guy on sort of the math of nitrogen. And if you want 80 to 150 pounds of nitrogen per acre for garlic, for me that's 8 to 10 pounds per bed, because these are about 1/10 of an acre. So I can do the math on how much nitrogen I want to put on. Ideally, you'd get about 1/3 on in the fall and 2/3 in the spring, but because I'm not going to pull my mulch off, I got to figure out how to get around that. So I go with that turkey feather in the fall, thinking that it's going to be there in the spring, it's not going to leach out. And then I also use a fish fertilizer, a liquid that I'll put on pretty much heavier than the application rates. These are tough plants, thick leaves, they can take it. And I'll do that before it's going to rain, so they'll get 24 hours to kind of absorb a little off the leaves, and then the rest will rain in. Everything goes down before the straw, except for, like on this bed in the spring, I'll run one 50-pound bag of 12-4-10 through here because it's kind of insurance for any decay. And then I will foliar feed once or twice or 3 times. This year with the late spring, I only did once because I don't want to get too much nitrogen too late in the season. This is already too late because otherwise you're encouraging the top growth and not the bulbs. Oh, how many soil samples? You know, I use, there's not a right answer on that. I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe a couple more. I try and just a scoop, 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 and I'm going down. I don't grab that top inch. I go down 2 to 5 inches because that's kind of where my garlic is. I'm sure if I took a second sample the next day and sent that in and did it in different places, I might get slightly different results, which is why this is somewhat over time. You're looking for trends and patterns. These soils, I have a couple of micronutrients that I tend to always be short on, so I'm always adding those. So planting, I gave you some stuff at the top of the page, but these beds are 39 by 104 feet. I've got 8-inch spacing on the garlic with a 1-foot spacing and then 8-inch spacing, 3-foot walking row. By now it starts to feel kind of crowded, but when it first starts, 3 foot's pretty wide, and then 6 rows like that. So you can get a roughly, if you do the math, it should be 5,400, but we kind of cheat a little bit on the ends and stuff, and so we get 5,500 in, and then there's a 2-foot walking path in the middle. Over the years, and Jerry, feel free to comment on this too, but you and I think, have gone the same way. We've gone shallower and shallower on our planting over the years. Garlic's not very sensitive. I think you've talked about your very first year, somehow you got the idea you were supposed to go down 8 inches or something. 9 inches. I go down, I tell people that the top of the garlic should be about a thumb length. And I use this dibbler, which is just a fancy name for things that make holes in the ground. This is just something I made. These are just post hole. And then these are just the, closet rods for hanging clothes. I punch this in because I've tilled that up, and you got one person going in and dropping the garlic in each hole, and then another person's coming along making sure the garlic's right side up, and then it's about a thumb deep. But we've had garlic, Jerry's had this, I've had this, where garlic's growing in the walkway because it just got dropped. I mean, they grow. And they're not very sensitive. And going shallower, we've learned over the years, we're so impatient to have it come up in the spring. The shallower the garlic is, the better it's going to grow, or sooner it's going to grow. And I also feel more comfortable putting a little heavier mulch on when the garlic's not as deep, because it can take, you can be out here for what feels like eternity, a week or two of 60, 70 degree days, and you pull some of that straw back and you still got a layer of ice underneath it. And you go, crap, I'm never going to get any garlic. It eventually does come up, but shallower and a good mulch cover is what has worked for us. We used to tend to plant second or third week in October. We're moving more to the earlier in October, 7th or 8th. I'm even thinking of going a little earlier. 8, 9 years ago, we had a fall in Minnesota where until after Thanksgiving, the ground did not freeze. And I was getting all these calls from people, particularly in the Twin Cities. My garlic's 6 inches tall. It's the third week in November, and I'm going, I'm sorry. It won't kill the garlic, but that tends to freeze out, and so you've lost that nutrient growth. So at the Garlic Festival, people say, when should you plant the garlic? I always say 3 to 4 weeks before your ground freezes solid. And they go, oh, thank you, and walk away. I go, wait a minute. But that is literally the truth. If you could predict when the ground is going to freeze solid, because you want a good root growth, but you don't want to get a lot of top growth. And I got a little patch over there where I do different experiments, and one year I put 40, 50 garlic in there, and then every week after the plant date I'd pull up half a dozen, and you'd be astounded after 3 weeks, you got 6, 8 inches of roots in 3 weeks. And that, I think, is what gets the garlic going in the spring. I've known people that have gone with augers and electric drills and drilled into frozen ground and dropped garlic in, and they get a crop, but I just don't think it's going to be as good. So, what kind of soils are the worst for garlic? Jerry and I were just discussing that wet is definitely a problem. Really heavy clay soils are a problem. There's viruses that are endemic in these garlics, unless you're doing something called tissue culture, which is what the big growers in China and California do, where they're growing it up in greenhouses using a little I'm not a biology major, I don't understand it. I've had it explained to me, but then they're starting with clean garlic. You're taking garlic out of the ground that has diseases in it and you're putting it back in. They can outgrow those viruses unless they get wet. Wet and cold is bad.
And I would add one more thing, and that would be pH.
Yeah, I forgot all about that. Yeah.
It likes pretty close to neutral pH. Anything extreme on either side is the garlic's just going to give up.
Yeah, I'll say a tiny bit on the acidic side, 6.8, 6.7. I shoot for, if it gets below 6.5, I'm nervous, and the pH has moved around over the years in here, but 6.5 to 7, I'm fine. If I get above 7, I'm going, I don't want to get much more than that. 6.6, 6.7, 6.8, I'm really happy. And partly I'm happy with that because most of the stuff you grow in a garden likes that too.
And that's most of our soils. We have several
Minnesota's
growers.
fortunate, yeah.
We have several growers way up north, Lake of the Woods, of all things. They have to amend, because it becomes such an acidic soil.
So the question is, how soon do we put the mulch down after planting? The short answer is, when my body is recovered from planting is when I do it. Anytime after planting and before the snow flies. And I'll pick a day, because you're on your hands and knees in straw. I pick a day that's got a nice north wind, cool enough that I can have long sleeves on and a jacket, because straw is itchy. So when I do it is 100% weather dependent. So for my own comfort.
How deep is the mulch that you put
Oh,
down?
in the fall when we're putting it, it's all fluffy, and it is, how deep is the mulch? It's 3 to 5 inches, pretty deep, but by now, still quite a bit. I mean, and that's because if it's shallower than that, boy, by the end of June, you got a lot of weeds. And you can make a choice to pull your mulch, and then you got to have your stuff to match whatever cultivating equipment you got, which might be by hand or if you've got a tiller or something. But garlic does not have a lot of deep roots. I'm not a big fan of using mechanical tillage if you can duck it, but that's just me. So I think that's it. Oh, and then clove, it's like tulips or any other bulbed plant. There is a right side up and a non-right side up. And we have people cracking the garlic, and we're pretty aggressive about having them watch for doubles. There's a handful in here. One year we had 400 or 500 doubles. We weren't really watching our crackers, and particularly with the purple stripe varieties, it's easy. Sometimes you'll have 2 cloves within one wrapper, and you got to feel for a ridge, and it matters because it's not a marketable garlic. You're just wasting time. So they're cracking, and then that planter, we do monitor our planters to say, are they going right side up? I think that's it on soil prep and planting. The question is scapes. Obviously, I should say obviously, only hardnecks typically have scapes. You got 2 choices. The Hmong community and some of the Asian community in particular want that whole scape all the way down to the bottom of the garlic to the basal plate, and you can pull those out. I did a couple hundred one year like that. You should try some if you grow garlic and you haven't, because the bottom of that scape that comes out of the bottom, it's like eating candy. It's delicious. I get why they want it. And then you have this hole, if you're a grower, that's wide open for rain and everything else to go in. And they've lost their hard necks, so they tend to flop over like soft necks, so I won't do that. Every variety tends to be a little different on how much it curls and when it curls, but we usually call it a pigtail. When it gets that second curl, we just snap them off. Jerry will often use a fancy scissors that he's got.
What we didn't quite realize is with the porcelains, especially, the scapes are so tough, the stalk is so hard, a hard neck, that you can literally pull the plant out of the ground. So we figured out it needed to be like the marbled purple stripes or rocamboles. And then we found out where we'd heard about the Hmong growers that were doing this, they were growing rocamboles. And well, if we'd have known that in the first place. If I can see that much below, when we're talking about when to pull these scapes, if you're not saving them for food or going to sell them, get them when you can. But if you're just getting them, and everybody understands why we take them off, right? Because it increases, especially in porcelains and purple stripes, it increases the size of the bulb.
Not so much in some of the other varieties,
right.
But in these, 5 to 10%.
And you don't have to deal with that scape at harvest time, because if you let one of the porcelains go, the plant will be this tall.
So harvesting is the last thing I'll mention here on this section before we move on to disease. If you look, you'll see that bottom leaf, every leaf is a wrapper. One wrapper per leaf. 9 to 11 leaves typically, often 10 or 11 per plant. But by the time you get that 10th or 11th leaf, the bottom 1 or 2 are already drying back. So you're never going to really see a plant with 11 leaves. Like right here, these bottom ones right here are already starting to die back. That's not disease, that's just the way the garlic works. And when you're down to 4 to 5 leaves, or 2 weeks before the garlic festival, if you're going to the garlic festival, you got to harvest. The porcelains and the purple stripes are not as fussy about being harvested on time. If you're late, we found when we did the rocamboles, they're pretty sensitive to breaking apart in the soil if you're late, which spoils them for selling. You could still consume them yourself. So we're driven by needing to have at least 10 days of curing and getting our teenagers out to clean and package. So we harvest no later than 2 weeks before the garlic festival. Ideally, you'd have 4 or 5 leaves left that are green. It's kind of the typical time to do it. This is what they call airplane wire. You can see that we've got 2x4s with lag bolts into the verticals in the shed. If you do the math on 5,500 garlic when it's green and what it weighs, there's a couple tons of weight here. And I have been assured by my guy that built this that the thing wasn't going to collapse, and it hasn't. But that's something to worry about, particularly in an older barn if you were to add a lot of weight and you didn't plan for it, because it is not like a snow load, it's pulling in. If anybody in here is an engineer, they can probably explain it better than I can. So I have a lightweight aluminum ladder. I'm climbing the ladder because I don't have insurance for my volunteers to do it. And I'm hanging it in bundles of 10. In theory, I could get 10,000 garlic in here if I didn't open this and hung here, and I didn't have the straw. I could get 7,000 in here, 28 by 40, hanging like this. Maybe more, but if you really cram it in, it just gets too tight and you're risking disease. I have 2 pretty heavy-duty 70 pint a day using the new technique of measuring, if you're into dehumidifiers, many Minnesotans are. 270s that I run when I first turn this on, because if it rains a day or 2 before and the garlic comes out at all wet, you can get this surface mold on the garlic that doesn't affect the eating or the quality, but it affects the look. It gets it brown and spotchy, so I'm big on the 2 dehumidifiers. I actually run the 1 all summer here. It's gotten humid in here, but I keep this closed up and I run this so when it gets hot and humid out there, I can come in here to cool off. It really works well. And you can see we've got the shed insulated down to the footings, and it's never been, we don't throw any heat in here, and it's never been below 25 degrees in this shed, ever. It's just amazing if you insulate well how you can keep the cold out. Because the cold in most of these kind of sheds comes in through the floor. And that little pink thing as a total aside is just my cheap little root cellar. I have greenhouse tape in the floor and a 50-watt heater and 2 thermostats. So I have a safety thing. I don't want to burn the shed down. But the heat tape and the 50-watt heater kick on at 35 degrees and kick off at 40. And I just keep the winter garden stuff, the squash and the potatoes and stuff in there. It's kind of a cool little deal. These are reusable zip ties. I started with one manufacturer and it turned out they weren't reusable. These are from Uline. I like their zip ties. And we've used these 4 years now, and they go on, and then this little thing, which is what broke on the bad manufacturer, you just pop them off. When you first put it on, you can just pull this. You don't need to have gloves and tape and everything else. It's easy to tie them tight. And then to hang them, I started, and Jerry still uses these. These are shower curtain hooks. You know, and you can just hang the shower curtain hook on, and that works pretty well. To then you leave that open, and then you just hang it over the wire, and you got your bundles of 10, and that works pretty well. But I'm up there like this with my hands all day. These things can get hung up, and these are surprisingly hard to find. I buy them from Amazon. These cost like 10 times what one of these cost. These just work really fast and they don't get caught on anything. And then as we sell the garlic, we just take them down and we can talk about curing and storage a little bit. But let's shift to disease. In 2012, we lost our entire crop to Phytoplasma and started over. And the consequence of starting over was that we brought another disease onto the farm, which I worked really hard to keep off. Phytoplasma is a small bacteria, I think the smallest bacteria, and if you're a biology major, feel free to correct me. It has an undifferentiated cell wall, which I've never understood. Like, does it not know its innie from its outie? But it's a weird thing. And it is spread, its common name is Aster yellows. Any master gardener in Minnesota will know, oh, Aster yellows, I know about Aster yellows. It is a bacteria. It can be killed with penicillin and things like that, but you'd have to go a plant at a time and inject them. It's spread by one insect, and one insect alone, called the Aster yellow leafhopper, which sounds kind of cool, except the Aster yellow leafhopper is one of the most prolific insects in the world. And leafhoppers in general, I've learned, much to my dismay, is one of the most common insects in the world. There's something like 40,000 different kinds of leafhoppers. And last year was a bad year for leafhoppers. 2012 was a horrible year for leafhoppers. They do not winter over here in Minnesota. It's too cold for them. The dividing line, depending on the winter, is usually northern Missouri, southern Iowa, where they will winter over, and they get blown up here in the spring with these lows. The leafhopper is not born with the disease, but they will bite a plant that has it, and they acquire it, as my entomologist friend said. If the leafhopper even looks at an infected plant, they get the disease. It apparently transmits right away. Incidence can be really low, like fewer than 1% of the leafhoppers. Garlic is not their preferred food, but when you get a lot of leafhoppers, you can get a lot of Phytoplasma. And in 2012, nobody knew what this was. It was an early year. The garlic was all up by the third week in March, believe it or not, and it looked like it was going to be the best crop ever. And then by middle of July, it looked like crap. Everything. And I'm sitting at the 2012 Garlic Festival on my phone trying to figure out what the hell this stuff was. And halfway through the Garlic Festival, I concluded that it was going to winter over. That was the big question. And if it didn't winter over, you could plant and be fine, but if it did, you couldn't. And in the middle of the festival, I put a sign up that said, eating only, because I had concluded that it was going to winter over. It turns out it does. We had an incident. We since that time, out of 5,500 garlic, I don't know, Joanne, we would see 5, 10, 15, 20 garlic that were phytoplasmic. Here's some from you can take these if you want. They are fine to eat. Some people are very sensitive to the smell. I tested 50, 60 people in 2012. A third of you will smell this as a chemically or a burnt rubber smell. About a third of you will smell this as like a licorice or an anise, a sweetish smell. About a third of you won't be able to smell anything. It's a little bit like that dress where people see it different colors on the internet, or you look at a house, somebody says it's green, somebody else says it's gray. We like to think we all see and experience things the same way. We don't. Phytoplasm is a clue. Visually, this stuff is really obvious to see when it's this bad. So feel free to crack some of these open, run your fingernail on it, smell it. I don't need any of these back. This is backup. We eat this stuff. It's fine to eat. Once you take the wrappers off, the smell goes away. The disease is not in the cloves, it's in the wrappers. And what it's doing is it's clogging the vascular system, the blood vessel system of the plant. The bacteria is just reproducing and clogging it so it can't bring the nutrients up from the roots to the plant. There really is, Jerry and I have gone round and round on this. You can kill the leafhopper with pyrethrin and some of the other even organically approved products, but you got to hit them directly, and during the day the leafhoppers like to hide out under the leaves. So you kind of got to go through plant by plant, leaf by leaf. and you don't, by the time you know you have an infestation, because the leafhoppers have looked at your garlic, you already have it. It's too late. You're not getting rid of the disease, you're just getting rid of the leafhoppers. We'll go on to bloat nematode. Bloat nematode is a microscopic, and it is microscopic. You won't see it with the naked eye, cow. It is an herbivore. It's not a nice Ayrshire dairy
you say
cow.
The word cow, you really get my attention.
Yeah, Eleanor has an Ayrshire dairy. They are the bad cows, not the good cows.
Oh, okay.
And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of nematodes. I've not done as much research on nematodes broadly, and there are good ones and there are bad ones. There's a bloat nematode that's specific to alliums, to garlic, to onions, to anything in the allium family. Got brought into the U.S. in the 1920s or 30s, showed up in California. It's also global. These nematodes eat, they're herbivores, and they like to eat around the basal plate where the roots and the leaves connect, that little circular thing. This is your basal plate right here. And if you have a bloat nematode garlic, when you pull it, you'll see a lot of the roots will be missing, and this will tend to be squishy. And there are a lot of myths out on the internet on bloat. I have had some personal experience with it because of starting over and one grower selling me one variety that turned out to have some bloat. And I didn't know it for a couple of years, and I was very fortunate because there wasn't very much. And I had to develop a technique. A woman in Pennsylvania who worked for the CDC got it the same time I did, and we wound up emailing back and forth, and she trained me. I've got a gallon of quaternary ammonia, which put me ahead of the rest of you when COVID-19 hit, because I already knew how to decontaminate and sterilize everything. Quaternary ammonia is what they use to sterilize hospitals. And so what I want to say about bloat. So its primary method of transmission is being brought on the farm from infected garlic. That's how I got a little patch of it. Another method of transmission is if you carry a piece of soil that has bloat on it onto the farm, which is one of the reasons I ask you guys to stay out of the garlic. The test for bloat nematode, which Jerry and I, which we require for the Garlic Festival, is basically they mash these cloves up that you send in, and they put it in water, and the little nematodes float. They move with water. And so if you get bloat in your field, you can go look at these great pictures of California fields that have it, and it looks like a river of disease through these fields because they go from leaf to leaf to leaf, and they can move in the morning when there's a heavy dew. They'll move from, if the leaves are touching each other and they're wet. If it rains and that rain water moves, you can move the bloat. And one of the myths is that it persists in the soil for a long time. When Jerry and I first ran into this, we were going with accepted wisdom, which was it persists in the soil for 20 years and you can't use that soil again for 20 years. That's not entirely correct. The bloat nematode is a 6th generation creature that becomes a cow in its 6th generation, starts out and it goes through 6. I can never remember if it's stage 2, 3, or 4, but one of the juvenile stages, if it's in a leaf and that leaf it goes dormant, so I got some old leaves hanging on some of my wires up there. If there was bloat in that leaf and it goes hanging, that can go for decades. And so then I take that leaf and I throw it out in the yard, or I compost it, or somebody drags it out, it'll wake up. And as a cow, it's going to look for something to eat. And the good news about the bloat nematode that affects is there are a limited number of things that it'll eat. The bad news is they keep finding it'll eat more and more stuff. They didn't think it ate alfalfa, it will eat alfalfa. But it wakes up, and if it doesn't find anything to eat, it will die. So it's not this mysterious mega thing from another planet that no matter what you can't get rid of. When I got a little patch of it, I quarantined that area with a big fence, a string. We sterilized all our clothing, all our shoes, all the equipment, cleaned the shed, sterilized all that. Every time we got anywhere into that area, we sterilized it. I wouldn't go into that area for a year. And then I planted mustards, thank you. Mustards, because they have an anti-nematode effect in the soil. And I was ruthless about going in there and pulling everything that wasn't a mustard because I didn't want to risk that there would be something in the soil that would then, it could eat if something woke up. But it is a scary disease because of that. And so I quarantined that area for a couple of years. I was ruthless for 4 years. If I saw garlic that I thought was turning yellow, we pulled it, I marked it with a flag. Because if there was anything else around it that turned yellow, then I'm going, crap, it's continued. We never had another garlic turn yellow. This was 8 years ago now, 9 years ago, and it's gone. Some of the people in the East Coast are arguably in denial. They keep saying their bloat is fusarium, which looks similar to the untrained eye, and so then they sell the garlic like they did to me. I thought I was seeing good garlic. You can't always tell when you're looking at it if it's an early infestation. And so we do require the testing. It's not foolproof. To really be foolproof, you'd have to have a USDA inspector come out here, look at my field. He would pick, or she would pick, what they wanted to test. And then they would certify the field. And that's the only way to 100%, and even that would be 98% for sure that you're getting clean garlic. The Garlic Festival, I'm happy with, Jerry's happy with, but people can cherry pick what they want to pick and send in if they want. It would take a pretty irresponsible person to pick a patch of yellow garlic and say no big deal and harvest it and sell it. Sometimes there are irresponsible people. But I'm very nervous about buying or bringing additional garlic on unless it's from somebody I know really well like Jerry, and I know the history and I know he's not a liar. Because once you get it, it can be hard to get rid of it. So any questions on bloat nematode? Little microscopic cows that live in garlic.
Well, and I'd like to overstate the obvious. Don't get it.
Yeah.
Just buy from people who test or that you trust, and buy locally wherever possible.
I say you're done with your curing when it's easy to get the wrappers off when they're dry. When we've had years when they're not dry, then you're taking your fingernails and you're clawing these wet wrappers off, and it's just painful and slow. Curing also, I tend things, neither Jerry or I cut the leaves off, we leave them on. I like to think those nutrients go into the bulb. I can't prove that, but it feels better to me. Same way with onions. You don't cut onions right away usually, you let them dry. I think it's better to have those leaves dry before you cut them. Generally, you're making one snip to cut off the top and then a couple snips to cut off the roots, and then you're taking off 1 or 2 wrappers, and then it's ready to go. And we do size. We have sizers hanging on the wall there, 1.5 inches, 2 inches, 2.5, 3. I can never remember. I can show you. So we sell by and we find that what I tell people is garlic is like Goldilocks. I have a whole page on my website about, people say, well, how should I store it? I say neither too hot, not too cold, not too dry, not too humid. And our kitchen's north facing. We keep garlic in the corner on our counter in the kitchen all winter. In the winter, that's 55, 60 degrees up against that wall. There's no direct sun. I say if you have to err on anything, better a little too dry, because if the garlic does dry up, those crunchy bulbs can still be thrown into stews and soups. You know that. They're good. Whereas if they get molds and rot because they're too wet, that's just not appealing. You tend to throw that. So we err on the side of a little drier. I don't have a lot to say on that. Any questions on curing and storage? Maybe I'm missing a whole theme there, but 2 to 3 weeks usually, shorter because we use the 2 dehumidifiers. I had one grower tell me that wasn't a natural way to do it, and I was ruining the garlic. Tough luck.
Well, and for those who are storing it to sell later, Chris and I have a wonderful problem, which is that we tend to sell out very quickly. But there are growers who want to be selling still in December, January. None here, obviously. I've seen people go, no, I want to be done with it by then. But there are, and if you're going to scale up, as we've been talking about since February with Victor Vassiliadis and his operation growing 7 acres, he needs to store for a longer period of time. So he's much more concerned with the right level of humidity, with the right airflow and all those things, so that that's still a marketable bulb come next March. If you want to know more about that. Yeah, and if you want to know more about that, I can send you to the resources for that.
So last thing I'll say on marketing, we do have a website. You can go look at it. It was built by a friend of our niece's. It's a WordPress website. We use WooCommerce for our shopping cart, PayPal to pay. We could get more sophisticated. With this volume of garlic, it's not worth it. In the olden days, when we went to the Garlic Festival, which hopefully we'll be going to this year, we sell about a third in a day at the Garlic Festival. We sell about a third to people locally and about a third online. Garlic is, from an economic point of view, one of the weirder products because you can go buy $2.50 a pound garlic from wholesale, and even less sometimes more. In bulk, you can pay as much as $30, or I've even seen $35 a pound garlic from certain seed companies and growers. And they're really not that different a product. So it's really about marketing and positioning. And I get asked these questions, can you grow your garlic? Is it all eating or is it all for seed? Hey people, garlic is garlic. So you're really dealing with positioning and how you want to brand and how you want to differentiate your product. And we're running, I can't even remember now, $15, $16 a pound, but we sell by the head because we tend to target a smaller scale or a lower volume consumer. We tend to be pretty much all retail. And so we sell by the head because then they know how much they're getting. And when we sold by the pound, then we get all these questions about, how many do you get in a pound of large or whatever. And so we'll sell extra large garlic at a certain price, large garlic at a certain price, medium at a certain price. It all works out to about the same price per pound. And then we charge shipping, and shipping has gotten so expensive. And as we get older, we care about community. So we're giving increasing priority, and I won't go into the details of it technically, but we're giving increasing priority to our friends and neighbors and families. They're getting first dibs at our garlic online. Second dibs is going to the Garlic Festival, and then third is everybody else, which I feel a little badly about sometimes because we have had loyal customers, but I don't know them. They're strangers to me. And Jerry has a different approach. He has access to a lot of growers, a lot of you, and he sells a lot more what I would call wholesale to growers. You got a whole market of people who want to sell into restaurants. We thought about doing that into the St. Cloud area. The better chefs, the message I would get is we might buy a little bit at half of your retail price because, and then we'll market it as Plum Creek Garlic, and we might have it as a bruschetta or whatever, but we're not going to use your garlic at your price to put in our spaghetti or whatever. We're just going to get off the Cisco truck, whatever they've got, soft necks from California. I don't want to compete in that market. I also don't want to price a lot of our customers who are of lesser means in St. Cloud's out of the market. So we are doing a non-economic allocation by creating three kinds of customers, if that makes sense. Friends, family, and neighbors get first dibs, and if we run out, we run out. That's just how we're doing it. So you are welcome to walk the 34 acres. We have paths, lots of them. You can go all around the perimeter here. You can go, we got some bridges over some marshes. We have Dinosaur Island. You can look for golf balls. Thank you guys for coming out, putting up with the heat today.